I'm going to give a little bit of show and tell. I know the focus is on the psychology of technology, and I know AI is very front of mind for a lot of folks. So I'm going to show a little bit of what we're doing with AI, but then in the spirit of, I've always preached that when people get together, whether virtually or in person, we should maximize interaction. So I'll try to leave as much time as possible for questions about anything. But just to jump in a little bit, just to get people up to speed on what we have been up to, what you see right here on the screen, some of y'all might be familiar with it. This is just a traditional exercise that you might see on Khan Academy. But what's new here is our bot, Khanmigo, which is currently built on top of GPT-4. And there's a couple of interesting things. You see a guardrail. The conversation is recordable and viewable by a teacher. Another guardrail, if the student asks for the answer, it will not tell them the answer. It's saying, hey, I'm here to be your tutor. And then the other interesting thing you might realize, it says, what do you think is the next step? And let's say a student makes a mistake. Let's say they don't do the distributive property correctly. It says, I see that you tried to simplify the equation, but I'm curious how you got to your step. Can you explain that thought process? Remember, we have to distribute the -2 to both the 9 and the 2m in the parentheses. So for anyone who's been well-versed with even the latest generation of large language models, they might be surprised by the sophistication that one, it's not only able to get the math right, but it's not giving the answer. It's acting like a thoughtful tutor would, and it's actively trying to diagnose what's going on in the student's mind and doing the pedagogically right thing, not just saying, remember to distribute correctly, but it's saying, can you explain your thought process, which is, I think, a very powerful dimension of large language models. And this wasn't by chance. I'm happy to talk about it, but we're doing a lot of work above and beyond the base model to give it this type of capability. But it's not just in math. It is also, let me go to the next slide. Oops. It is also, this right here is our computer programming on Khan Academy. And here in this exercise, the student is trying to make the clouds part. And let's say they only got the left cloud parting, and they can ask the AI, why is only the left cloud moving? And this is an interesting question because it's operating at a very high level of abstraction. The AI needs to understand that those ellipses that they're drawing on that screen are actually to draw a cloud, and then what movement looks like and all that. And once again, it's not giving the answer, but it's giving hints. Hey, you're decrementing the left x variable. Maybe you need to do the same thing to the right x. And I have to say, I've seen this with many students, including my own children, and I have a background in computer science. It's in many ways better than I can be because it understands the code immediately. It's infinitely patient, and it's available whenever the students actually need it. This right over here is an example of answering the age-old question, why do I need to learn this? So here it has context of the video that the student is watching, and it asks, well, what do you care about? And the student says, I want to be a professional athlete. And here it connects it. Well, as a professional athlete, understand the science of sizes, which this video is about, can help you appreciate how your body works at a cellular level, and it gives examples of it. And another feature that we've just recently added is it's actually going to remember that about the student, so that the next time the student asks a question or wants a word problem or wants to be quizzed, it says, hey, are you still interested in becoming a professional athlete? But we also think it's very important for those insights that the AI keeps about the student, for that to be transparent to the student. So we have mechanisms so the students say, well, I'm not interested in being a professional athlete anymore. I'm now into chess, whatever it might be. So everything I've shown so far, I would categorize as your traditional tutoring use case, where you're trying to help unblock a student as they're trying to do some type of learn something or motivate them to a certain degree. What we realize, we've been building Khanmigo as a tutor for every student and a teaching assistant for every teacher, but it can start to do things that transcend what you would expect of a typical tutor. This is a and I'm curious what y'all think about the psychology of all of this, but this is an activity where you can actually talk to literary characters. So in this case, the user says, I would love to meet Eeyore the donkey. And Eeyore says, or the simulation says, oh, hello there, it's me, Eeyore. Not that anyone would notice. Since you're here, what would you like to talk about? And so if the student says, why are you so pessimistic? And then the simulation of Eeyore. Well, now, isn't that a question? I suppose it's just my nature, you see. Some donkeys are born with a sunny disposition. Others, well, we see the thistles more than the roses. But that's life, isn't it? We can't all be Tiggers bouncing about. Now, what about you? Do you find yourself more of a Tigger or an Eeyore in your own life? So you might already see something interesting going there. This isn't just your traditional interactions that many of y'all are probably familiar with ChatGPT, even if you're using more sophisticated models like GPT-4. It's trying to drive the conversation and doing it in thoughtful and pedagogically sound ways. Whoops. Clearly. So here's another activity that wouldn't typically do with a tutor, but this is one where a student can engage in a debate with the AI on a whole series of topics. Here, this would be, say, a high school or a college student debating whether the government should cancel student debt. And it says, would you like to argue for or against this? And the student says, I'm against canceling student debt, and gives their argument. Doesn't solve the problem of high college costs, et cetera, et cetera. And then the AI will take the other side of it. And after going through several iterations, it'll give them feedback on some of their points. And obviously they can then switch sides. And we've already gotten a lot of feedback from especially high school and college students that they love being able to test out their ideas in a safe environment without fear of judgment. It makes them much more confident to then argue either side of those ideas when they get into a real classroom or a real seminar. So this last one I show, I know the biggest topic in higher education for sure, and to a large degree K-12 as well, is what do you do about the cheating problem of AI? And you've already seen Khanmigo won't cheat. It'll act as an ethical tutor. But the obvious question is, well, still, what's to stop the student from going to ChatGPT and getting that to write their essays, or going to their older sister and getting them to write their sisters? There's websites that will charge you $5 a page. This is well before ChatGPT existed, that will charge $5 a page to write your essay. So what we imagine, and what I'm showing you here isn't just a demo. This is actually something we're going to ship in about a month. But the whole cycle is going to be, a teacher is going to be able to not only construct assignments and rubrics with the AI, then use the AI to assign those assignments. And then the AI won't do it for the student, and the teacher or the professor can decide how much support to provide. But then the AI can work with the student. So let's come up with a thesis statement. What do you think of the argument? And then the student does it. They go back and forth. It encourages the student to make their arguments, tighten things up. And you could then get into an interaction like we're seeing here, where it can highlight parts of the passage, almost like you're working on a Google Doc with a thoughtful collaborator, and says, hey, you start with a vivid scene to land the reader in a story, but it makes sense to take a step back and tell the stories that happened to you. This is doing it right here for a college essay. I would suggest giving a little bit more attention to how Steve inspired you and changed your life. And so it'll work with the student on this, making sure that the student is doing the bulk of the work. And then it can report back to the professor or the teacher, not just the output of the work, which is what we're typically would see when students do essays, but it can give the output plus the entire process. It could say, hey, teacher, here's the essay. And by the way, based on the rubric, I would give it a 4 out of 5 on this dimension, a 5 out of 5 on this dimension, a 3 out of 5 on that. But you're the teacher. You decide what should be the final grade. And by the way, we spent 4 hours working on it. Sal had a little bit of trouble with the thesis statement originally, but we got through it. You can look at the transcript. So I'm confident it's his work. And not only that, it's pretty consistent with the writing that we've seen from him when he was been in class. And not only does that give professors a lens into the process, and they could even get aggregate reports about places that everyone in their class was having, everyone's having trouble with, finding credible sources or whatever it might be. But then if a student decided to cheat somehow, go to ChatGPT, get someone else to write their essay, and they just copied it and pasted it into the AI, into our AI, it would tell the professor, like, I don't know where this essay came from. It looks shady. And by the way, it doesn't look really consistent with what they're doing in class. And so as opposed to AI all of a sudden being a cheating tool, not only does it not cheat, but it can actually undermine any other form of cheating, even forms of cheating that existed well before AI came on the scene. This last one I'll show you, this is an exercise on Khan Academy in American history. I think this is revolving around the Spanish-American War. And as we talked about before, if you're in student mode and you say, tell me answer, it won't do that. But this is a teacher account here. And so if you switch from student mode into teacher mode, which we just did, and now you say, tell me the answer, it acts as a teacher's guide. Not only will it help the teacher understand the concept, but it can help them plan lessons. Can you give me a good lesson hook? Make it exciting. And say, absolutely. How about starting the lesson with a short role play activity? Divide your students into groups and assign each group a different country involved in the Spanish-American War. Ask them to imagine they're diplomats from their assigned country, so on and so forth. So that's kind of, there's more that we're working on, but I just wanted to give you a quick sense of how we've been thinking about AI in education. We're also looking at ways that Khanmigo can potentially transcend Khan Academy. So everything you just saw might be able to work on the New York Times website, might be able to work on Wikipedia. Teachers might be able to sign, hey, read this article in the Atlantic, and Khanmigo is going to quiz you on it, and then report back to me how well you understood it. We think all of this is going to happen in the next year or two. But with that, I'd love to just open it up to questions. Anything that y'all might have about anything.
That was fascinating. Thank you so much. All right, questions. We have Sal for about 15 more minutes. We'll still pass the mic so we can hear each other.
It's still very early days, so we haven't done like super rigorous research on it yet, although that's definitely in the works. We have seen early on, one of the first principles is do no harm. And our first measure of no harm is obviously we are able to measure student engagement on just classic Khan Academy. How much time are they spending? Are they doing exercises? How often do they disengage, et cetera? We could always measure those things. So based on those metrics, what we're seeing in real classrooms with real teachers and real students is that not only is it not causing some form of disengagement, it's keeping them engaged longer. Which is obviously the intuition here that students will be stuck less. It'll help them motivate things more. We also think it'll help teachers engage their students more. And we do want, just today, our team showed me some things where Khanmigo, the little emoji, will have more emotion. Where if you tell it something nice, a little heart will come. It'll be, it's cute. It is something that will emote more. And you can even see in a lot of the tone that we've taken this is a lot less robotic than what you might be used to from things like ChatGPT. And this is intentional. So it can build a connection with the student. And as I mentioned, we're also adding a sense of memory. That's the other issue with traditional chatbots is every transaction is just a transaction. It doesn't remember what you talked about last week. It doesn't remember that you wanted to be a professional athlete, or that you were worried about your biology test. We want Khanmigo to say, hey, how did the test go? Are you still worried about this? Do you still want to do this? So yeah, our hope is that you can start building a connection, and hopefully it can be a healthy one. We have a lab school up here in Northern California, Khan Lab School, where my kids go. And even though the school's charter is to reimagine education, make use of whatever tools make sense to make use of, it's all about how do you harness tools, whether it's fancy tools like Khanmigo or something very basic, to foster human-to-human interaction. So used well, not only do these tools not supplant human interaction, but I think they open up more time and space for human interaction. So even before Khanmigo came on the scene, we've always said the best practice of using Khan Academy is have your students, maybe 20 minutes a day, work at their own time and pace. Some of it could be things that teachers assign, but others could be system recommendations, things that kids are ready for if they're moving fast, or things they need to review if they need to address some gaps in their knowledge. And then the teacher can see where the students are, take 5 aside, take 10 aside, do a small group intervention, maybe make them do some group problem solving. A lot of what we do at KLS is, because in some ways a lot of that core skill learning can happen more efficiently, class time is nothing but collaborative learning. I think KLS probably does more collaborative. If you took a stopwatch, probably 5 or 10 times the amount of collaborative person-to-person learning that you would see in any traditional school. What I'm excited about Khanmigo on this front, I think in the next, it's really just our bandwidth issue. In the next 2 to 3 years, for sure, maybe sooner, you're going to see a world where inside of a classroom, the teacher can tell Khanmigo, hey, can you put these kids into breakouts, and can you facilitate each of these breakouts? Now, on a setting like Zoom, it's actually quite easy to do something like that. But there might be, we'll have to think about how you merge the Khanmigo world and the physical world. But in the 3-year time frame, it's almost worst case. It asks the kids questions, and we're already adding the ability to talk to Conmigo. That's going to be in place within a year. So it can hear the students talking. They can talk back to it and say, well, what about this question? Or what about that? I think in the 3 to 5 year time frame, you're going to be able to have, you're going to be able to have, talk to Conmigo the way that y'all are talking to me right now. And I think there might be even lower tech things that we do before that. We've been thinking about an activity where multiple students can have a debate with the AI, where the AI could actually facilitate a guess who your classmate is, like where two people are talking to someone else in the classroom, but it's facilitating in a way where they get to know each other on a much deeper level than they would, based on all the cliques and stereotypes that kids have in middle school or high school. So yeah, that's our hope, that it can be used to enable human interaction, not in some way stifle it. It definitely shouldn't replace it. Even in the most vanilla implementations that we're seeing in classrooms, teachers are saying, wow, it's able to help unblock those kids when I couldn't get to them. It's helping them to learn to ask questions. It's helping me understand that they had some of these questions that I didn't know before. So it's just providing more supports, and it's not, I don't think, taking away human interaction. Just as Conmigo being able to support a student in the moment, in no way, I don't think, undermines the need for a teacher. In fact, it makes for more students are supported. It's going to give the teacher better information. And then if overall learning and motivation is going on better, it's going to free up the teacher more time and energy, et cetera. I'll first answer your question from the teacher's point of view, and then I'll answer it from kind of the instructional support point of view. As we know, even in districts where they've adopted very, let's call it prescriptive curricula, a lot of these high quality instructional curricula are very like, you got to do this on this day, do this on this day. Most teachers don't follow that to the T. They adapt it for the class, oftentimes with good reason. It's typical. I see this at KLS. Teachers will spend 10, 15 hours a week doing things like creating lesson plans, creating assignments, rubrics, grading papers, writing progress reports, working on IEPs. And that's all time taken away from students. And honestly, it's probably one of the sources of burnout that we're seeing a lot in teachers. So I think it's an unambiguous good is if we can help teachers take some of that time back for themselves, as long as the quality of the lesson plans and everything they're doing is as good or better than what they've historically done. I'm also excited from a teacher adoption point of view. Almost every ed tech solution before this, including Khan Academy, the sell to teachers was, hey, look at these efficacy studies. If you use this 60 minutes a week, your kids will grow this much. And we have all those studies. And teachers agree with it philosophically. Oh, get more personalization, mastery learning. But it's just one more thing for them to learn, one more thing for them to adapt to. But here, there's a pitch like, yeah, there's one more thing to learn, but it might save you a dramatic amount of time net. So I think that will create some more pull on the teacher side. From an instructional coach side, I think it's just like a teacher benefits when Conmigo supports a student, and then they can get a report back on how things are going. I can imagine instructional coach, you still run the PD sessions, you still run all the workshops, but I think all of us know that it's one thing when you're in the workshop, but it's a whole other thing when it's the night before class, and you kind of forgot a lot of what happens in that workshop, but you still want to do the best practice. It's great to have that support right in the moment. And I think from the instructional support, the instructional coach side, it's great. It would be great for them to get a report back saying, hey, all of these teachers that you're supporting, this is what they've been doing. This is what we have to be careful for over 18 folks that they have to be comfortable sharing it with the instructional coach, what they're doing. But I think there is a world where an instructional coach actually gets higher fidelity and more support and have more touch points with the teachers than, a handful of PD sessions and things like that. Yes and no. I'm a little bit of a traditionalist here. I'm not one of these people who believe that, now that AI can write papers or write code or create art, human beings shouldn't learn to do those things anymore. If you, the analogy I gave, if you're if you want to be an editor of a newspaper, you need to be able to write reasonably well, ideally better than any of your staff writers. At least you need to be able to give them feedback so they can go from okay to great. And similarly, we are all now going to have an army of staff writers with these AIs, or an army of junior coders with these AIs. But if you don't know what it's really doing and you don't know how to put the pieces in place, you're going to be on the wrong side of the economy. You're going to be kind of a recipient as opposed to one of the drivers of being able to do this. So I actually think it puts even a higher pressure for students to learn to write better. And unfortunately, we've seen a decline in writing, but to write better, more critical thinking skills, being able to do research better, you name it, even coding. At the same time, I think it is also going to be valuable for students to become very familiar with in certain contexts. Yes, it makes sense to be supported by an AI. I showed that writing example where we think that's actually a healthy amount of support from an AI, and it gets the student. They're both helping. Hopefully, it helps them to learn to write better, and it's helping them to learn this next generation of tools. I think there's another step, especially maybe for older students, late high school, college, graduate school, where it is important for them to learn the tools without any guardrails. Because at Khan Academy, I am asking team members, I'm like, look, you should, if you're not using these tools, even in some way, shape, or form to improve your productivity, like you're not having an open enough mind right now, and otherwise things might pass you by. So I'm really pushing people to do that. So I think the same thing is true. It would be healthy if in school students have some projects or activities where they are encouraged to use whatever they want. But then there's instead of just writing a business plan, start the business. That's real world learning. And if to write the business plan or to do the modeling on the spreadsheet, you leverage some generative AI, so be it. But this is your business, so you better make sure you understand what assumptions it's making and tweaking them and giving it feedback accordingly. Yeah, I'll take them in reverse order. I mean, on the and to some degree, I'm about to say what applies even before generative AI, where ed tech tools like Khan Academy have existed without Khanmigo. I would be the last person to advocate that using some of this as somehow trying to reduce the cost per student. Now, I don't think that the cost per student is always used well or efficiently. I think not as much as student facing as possible. At the high end, you do have school districts. New York City is spending on the order of $40,000 per student per year. That's a lot of money, and I know most of that is not going to that class of 25 students. That teacher's not getting paid $800,000. It's going to other things. So I think that's a separate issue that in some ways ed tech does not touch. But for the most part, I think we would all argue that the more resources that are allowing us to have an excellent education for these students and supporting them, it's probably a good investment. And so I don't think ed tech will just allow you to do more with what that investment is. So if the best student teacher ratio you can do is 30-1, obviously 20-1 would be even better. But if you can do 30-1, the ed tech will help you personalize it more, help you address more of the students' needs, et cetera, et cetera. So I definitely don't think it should be a reason for cost driving. I think on the trust issue, I think it's a real thing. And I like the way you phrased it. I haven't heard it that way before. Dollars and, it's really goodwill in their hearts and dollars in their eyes. I would say in that order, because I meet a lot of good people who I think do tell themselves, oh, I want to really help level the playing field in this way or that way. But either naively or maybe they're talking both sides of their mouth is, someone's going to put pressure on them, especially if they're taking outside investment. Like at some point you have to turn the screws to start making some money, and then you're going to have to make some choices that might not be consistent with your heart. That's, I don't want to be all high and mighty about it, but that's why we set up Khan Academy as a not-for-profit. My old job, I was at a hedge fund, arguably the most for-profit job that one could have. But I believe that there's a few industries, mainly healthcare and education, where market forces haven't historically played out well, where the decision maker, the buyer, and the beneficiary are all different people. And the outcomes of market forces are not necessarily consistent with our values. If someone is dying, bleeding on the steps of the ER, you shouldn't check whether they can pay before you treat them. Likewise, if there's a young person who wants to learn, has potential that could be tapped, we as a society, I think, believe for all of our good, that student should be able to tap into their potential. I also, as a not-for-profit, we all just wanted people never to question what our intent was, that our bottom line really is world-class education for everyone. And I think this AI moment, I know I'm sounding a little preachy even when I'm hearing myself, but this AI moment, I was I didn't even realize, actually yesterday, exactly this time, I showed up on Zoom and I didn't realize the talk I was giving, it was a debate. And the debate, I was pro AI side, and there was another gentleman who's a prominent journalist who was anti AI in education. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. It was like really like a real like debate. And they kept trying to make us argue, even though I agreed with a lot of what he said. And at the end of it, what he said is, look, I still am very afraid of AI in education because, to your point, there's a lot of dollar signs, a lot of people pouring in, and it's a lot of people with not ideal incentives. And he says, and his point is, I don't think there's a lot of Khan Academies out there. And I just told our team this earlier this morning. We had a little bit of a gathering, and I'm like, look, it's any organization, any tribe of people, you always want to win, you're competitive, we all have egos. But what I told our team is, we exist not for self-preservation or for our egos, but I quoted that gentleman yesterday. I was like, not a lot of organizations are mission focused. And so that's why, and I'm trying to rah our team. I'm like, that's why we need to exist. That's why we need to, lead in this dimension. Because if we don't, yeah, you're going to have a lot of noise. You're going to have a lot of things there that really aren't in the best interest of anyone, but they're going to have huge sales teams, huge marketing budgets, billions of dollars are flowing in. And then it's going to turn into what we've seen historically in not just in ed tech, but in publishing and in other fields where the things that get produced and bought are not things that feel magical. I mean, it's a sign I point out all the time that there aren't really any brands in education. If someone says, oh, that's an Apple Watch, like, oh, that's going to be a nice watch. But if someone says, and I'm nothing against any of the people, that's a Pearson textbook, it's going to be awesome. No one, and Pearson's fine. I mean, that's an HMH textbook. They're not brands because they're kind of trying to serve a different purpose. But I think education is one of those areas where, yes, it's valuable to really scrutinize what people's bottom line are.
All right, Sal, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for all that you do.